Back in 2016, journalist and historian Jelani Cobb went to Newark, New Jersey to report on a troubled police department being forced to reform. This summer, he went back to see what's changed since then. Here's a preview of his new film for Frontline, Policing the Police 2020.
One thing I noticed right away were the protests. Unlike in other cities, where the police confronted protesters with rubber bullets and tear gas, in Newark, Mayor Baraka was leading the march. How have you been? Good. We met up in a city park. Thank you for taking time. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in many places in this country, dozens of places in this country, there were protests that tipped over into violence. We saw police cars being set on fire in Salt Lake City.
Right.
Newark is a city, it's almost the opposite. Things remain relatively calm during the protests here. I wanted to understand how that happened.
A lot of prayer, brother. Historically, people know what we've been through in Newark. We needed police reform in 1967, and we burned the city down for 3 or 4 days. And we still need police reform 50 years later or so. So I think in their heart, they understood that in and of itself would not give us the results we were looking for.
And Jelani joins me now. He is a staff writer for The New Yorker and a journalism professor at Columbia University. Jelani, welcome. It is a really powerful film. I watched it today, and it's a really a powerful follow-up to your 2016 documentary. First of all, why did you choose to focus on Newark, New Jersey?
Well, first, thank you for having us, having me to talk about the film. We chose Newark because it was this place that seemed to be at the center of the issue that we were trying to look at. One, it was a place that had historically been defined by an incident of police brutality that culminated in 4 days of rioting in 1967 that scarred the city for decades after. And then in 2014, the Department of Justice had found a pattern in practice of violation of the constitutional rights of citizens in the city of Newark at the hands of the police. And lots of things the police were doing were unconstitutional, and they began the steps to create a consent decree which would provide federal oversight for how the city of Newark operated with its police department. So all those things made it really pertinent to have that conversation at that time.
Well, at one point in this latest film, you noted to Newark Mayor Ras Baraka that the officers in a now disbanded gang unit who conducted questionable stops were Black and brown themselves. Jelani, What was the mayor's response to that, his view of this notion of having diverse officers?
Sure. I mean, I think he was talking about there being problems that would be able to continue to exist irrespective of the background of the people. And that's what you get when people talk about systemic problems in a city or within a department. And the backgrounds of the people might mitigate in some small ways some of the problems that you're witnessing, but it's not the one-shot solution to having a police department that has a dysfunctional relationship and is chronically abusing the rights of people whom they are charged with protecting and serving.
So tell us about some of the changes that have happened in the city of Newark in recent years.
So we came back 4 years later. We were looking, like everyone, at the video that came out of Minneapolis this summer with the death of George Floyd, and thinking this is really at the heart of the things that we were trying to talk about in Newark 4 years ago. And so we thought it would be good to look at that city and see how it has made progress or not in the intervening years. And also one of the kind of fundamental things is that it was implicitly a way of comparing and contrasting the Department of Justice as it related to these issues under Barack Obama and the Trump Department of Justice as it related to policing oversight. And we found that the department had made some progress. It still has a lot of work to do, but it was certainly not the same department that we had seen 4 years ago with lots more training, lots more strict oversight of what actually is legal and what's not legal in terms of police behavior, and had revamped and reformed its record keeping and civilian complaint processes so that people who had a problem with the police could actually have a higher likelihood of being heard. And so those were some of the things that we saw while we were there.
And the mayor also told you that defunding the police is necessary, but he does not support abolishing it. And you show us the Newark Community Street Team, which enlists former gang members, among others, to diffuse conflicts and work as mentors. Let's go ahead and watch a clip of that.
Talk to me a little bit about what's happening here and why the street team is walking down Brookdale Street.
Yeah, so July 4th weekend, we had a double homicide on this block.
Wow.
We talked directly to the family members who've been impacted. And if there is plan for retaliation, that we convince them not to retaliate. We always say that we cannot stop the first bullet, but we sure can stop the second, the third, and fourth one.
Jelani, this was such a fascinating dynamic to watch, and just to see their posture and then the posture of the people they approached. And you could see sort of this connection happening in a much different way than perhaps if they were wearing police uniforms. So tell us a little bit more about this group.
Absolutely.
How big is it? What exactly are they trained to do?
So there are about 50 people who are part of it. And these are people, very many of them, people who have done harm in their communities previously. And the point of the Newark Community Street Team is to have people who are known in these neighborhoods and sometimes known for not really great things, who can turn things around and say, we want to actually do something to try to make our community better. And so police respond when something has already reached the boiling point. And what they do here is a lot of intervention work, or really kind of community diplomacy, to try to head off conflicts before they ever rise to the level of requiring the police. And in instances where something does happen, they do a kind of grassroots diplomacy, really, finding people who have conflict, finding issues that have been unresolved, and then directly interacting with people to try to head off the cycles of retribution, which we've seen in lots of American cities, that just increase the toll of violence and the impact on people who live in these communities.
It's interesting that you use the word diplomacy, because that's what I thought of. I thought they seem to be ambassadors of peace, with a different kind of standing and credibility in a way that only they could have. So it's really interesting to hear you use that word. Finally, Jelani, you open up in the film, you talk about, your own background and experiences and encounters that you've had with police. What do you ultimately hope that this film contributes to this national conversation that we're having, this racial reckoning, not just when it comes to policing, but as a society that has been taking place this year?
I think we've had these questions about whether or not policing can be different. And we set out to look at that with these two films. To say, here's a city that is attempting to do something different, and what are the obstacles, what are the possibilities? And we have at least one example, so hopefully this will contribute to the dialogue. When people have these conversations, they can say, well, there is the Newark example, and we know what they're doing there. Perhaps that's something that other cities can think about doing as well.